नमस्कार। मैं उत्तर प्रदेश के और सभी दर्शकों को जो लोग कहीं से भी जुड़े हैं उनको बहुत नमस्कार करता हूं और नेटवर्क 18 का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूं कि उत्तर प्रदेश के सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के लिए उन्होंने हमारे सामने कुछ बिंदु रखे और हमसे जवाब चाहा है। साथियों, हम सब जानते हैं कि जब तक हम स्थायी रूप से आर्थिक प्रगति नहीं करेंगे तब तक हमारे लिए कोई भी प्रगति बेमानी है। टेम्परेरी प्रगति का कोई मतलब नहीं रह जाता जब तक हम स्थायी लोगों के जीवन में बदलाव न ला पाए। उत्तर प्रदेश देश का सर्वाधिक जनसंख्या घनत्व वाला राज्य है और उत्तर प्रदेश में 25 करोड़ लोग रहते हैं। आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने 2014 में जब से अपना हाथ में देश की बागडोर संभाली है तब से उन्होंने उत्तर प्रदेश को अपने टारगेट पर रख करके आर्थिक विषमताओं को दूर करने के लिए कृषि के क्षेत्र में जो हमारे किसान भाई थे या अन्य वर्गों के लोग जो शामिल थे, एग्रीकल्चर पर निर्भर थे, उनके जीवन स्तर को उठाने के लिए लगातार काम किया है। आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी की इच्छा है जब तक गांव के लोग विकास की मुख्य धारा में शामिल नहीं होंगे तब तक देश के विकास को पूर्णतः हम पूरा नहीं कर पाएंगे। इसीलिए आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने तय किया माता गंगा जो हमारी जीवन दायिनी है, पहले हम लोगों ने मां गंगा को साफ करने के लिए अलग से एक योजना बनाई। जो हम सब जानते हैं कि माता गंगा को साफ करने के लिए कई योजनाएं इससे पहले भी विभिन्न सरकारों में बनी, लेकिन वो योजनाएं सिर्फ फाइलों तक सीमित थी। लेकिन आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में पहली बार राष्ट्रीय गंगा परिषद की बैठक हुई और उसमें तय किया गया कि गंगा की जो हम साफ करने की अविरल गंगा अविचल गंगा की बात करते हैं, इसके साथ साथ हमें अर्थ गंगा से भी जुड़ना होगा। अर्थ गंगा का मतलब यह है कि गंगा के किनारे स्थायी रूप से सफाई, पर्यावरण की दृष्टि से पीने लायक, आचमन करने लायक जल बनाने के लिए हमें वहां पर रोजगार के साधन डेवलप करने होंगे और केमिकल की खेती जो करते थे उससे हमें दूर रहना होगा। माता गंगा के किनारे दोनों तरफ हम 10 किलोमीटर तक नेचुरल फार्मिंग की तरफ आगे बढ़ेंगे और नेचुरल फार्मिंग हमारे दैनिक जो हम लोग अनाज उपयोग में लाते हैं, गेहूं, दाल, चावल या अन्य गन्ना, ये तो हम करेंगे ही। इसके साथ साथ जो आयुर्वेदिक दवाइयां हैं उनको अगर हम गंगा के किनारे बोएंगे और हम देसी नुस्खे के आधार पर यानी कंपोस्ट खाद या गोबर से जो बनी हुई खाद है उसके आधार पर हम अगर खेती आयुर्वेदिक दवाओं की कर करके मार्केटिंग करेंगे तो आसपास जो गंगा के लोग खेती करेंगे उनका आर्थिक व्यवस्था भी बढ़ेगी और माता गंगा को स्थायी रूप से हम साफ कर पाएंगे। ये बहुत बड़ी चुनौती भरा काम था, लेकिन आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने इस चुनौती को स्वीकार किया और उत्तर प्रदेश में चूंकि माता गंगा सर्वाधिक बहती है, कुल लंबाई 2500 किलोमीटर में से लगभग 1200 किलोमीटर उत्तर प्रदेश से होकर के माता गंगा गुजरती हैं। मां गंगा के दोनों तरफ 10 किलोमीटर तक हम अपने किसानों के जीवन स्तर में बदलाव लाने के लिए नेचुरल फार्मिंग पर जोर दे रहे हैं, प्राकृतिक खेती पर जोर दे रहे हैं और वो खेती ऐसी होगी जो सीधे उनके आर्थिक व्यवस्था को मजबूत करेगी। जो आयुर्वेदिक दवाइयां हैं उनको हम वहां बो करके, ग्रो करा करके और मार्केटिंग करके उनके आर्थिक व्यवस्था को मजबूत कर सकते हैं और उनके जीवन स्तर में बदलाव ला सकते हैं। यदि कोई किसान मजबूत होता है तो केवल एक परिवार नहीं, पूरी सोसाइटी डेवलप करती है। हमें पता है कि किसान अपनी परचेजिंग जो है गांव में ही करता है। गांव में जब किसान अपने उत्पाद को बेच करके अपनी दैनिक उपयोग की वस्तुओं को खरीदेगा तो गांव में ही राशन के संबंधित जो अन्य मसाले हैं, तेल है या अन्य चीज खरीदेगा। इसके अलावा कपड़े सिलाएगा तो गांव में ही सिलाएगा, जूता खरीदेगा तो गांव में ही खरीदेगा। तो पूरे गांव का समेकित विकास के लिए प्लेटफॉर्म बहुत बड़ा आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने तैयार किया। इसके अलावा स्थायी रूप से माता गंगा के आसपास गंदगी नहीं होने पाएगी जब हम वहां पर नेचुरल फार्मिंग करेंगे। हम यूरिया को नहीं ले जाएंगे, हम केमिकल्स को नहीं ले जाएंगे, हम कीटनाशकों का उपयोग नहीं करेंगे तो माता गंगा को स्थायी रूप से साफ हम कर पाएंगे। और उत्तर प्रदेश के किसानों का और किसान भाइयों, हमने देखा है कि ज्यादातर ऐसे लोग जुड़े हैं जो जिनको समाज में अभी तक वो स्थान नहीं मिल पाया था जो मिलना चाहिए था। उनके हक और हुकूक के लिए आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने लगातार उनके जीवन को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए काम किया, किसानों की आय को दोगुना करने के लिए काम किया। अभी आपने देखा कि कई बार किसानों की बात आई लेकिन किसी ने भी किसान सम्मान निधि नहीं घोषित की। कोई सोच सकता था इस देश के अंदर कि गरीब किसान को भी पेंशन मिलेगी? आज हर किसान अपने चाहे बीज के लिए, चाहे खाद के लिए, बच्चों की फीस के लिए या अन्य कोई मुसीबत आ जाए तो उसके सभी किसानों के खाते में 6,000 रुपया जा रहा है और किसान अपने आप को महसूस कर रहा है कि मुख्य धारा में है। आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में उनकी बातों को भी सुना जा रहा है और किसानों को आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने अपने परिवार का सदस्य मानते हुए उनके जीवन स्तर में बदलाव लाने का काम किया है। आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने केवल किसानों को ऑर्गेनिक खेती के साथ, नेचुरल फार्मिंग के साथ, आयुर्वेदिक दवाओं के साथ केवल नहीं जोड़ा। उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि जो हमारे बड़े मतलब शहर हैं या बड़े विलेज हैं जहाँ से माँ गंगा गुजर रही हैं, वहाँ हमें पर्यटन को बढ़ावा देने के लिए वहाँ बड़े-बड़े नाव या बड़े-बड़े बजड़े, आप देखते होंगे बनारस में ढेर सारे बाहर से लोग आकर के इवन देन फॉरेनर्स भी आते हैं, तो बड़े-बड़े नाव और बजड़ों पर बैठ करके माता गंगा का दर्शन भी करते हैं, पर्यटन भी करते हैं और इसके अलावा वहाँ के आसपास के जो नाविक हैं, उनको भी फायदा होता है और पर्यटन को बढ़ावा मिलता है। माता गंगा का दर्शन सब लोग करना चाहते हैं क्योंकि जीवन दायिनी है। माँ गंगा के जल से सबको तृप्ति मिलती है। उनको लगता है कि मोक्ष में कलयुग में पाने का यही एकमात्र आधार है। पर्यटन को भी लगातार बढ़ावा देने के लिए हमारी सरकार काम कर रही है और ये सब आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के कुशल मार्गदर्शन में हो रहा है। देखिए, उत्तर प्रदेश में सबसे बड़ी चुनौती 2017 में हमारे सामने थी, जब भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के कुशल मार्गदर्शन में योगी जी की बनी। तो हमारे सामने सबसे बड़ी चुनौती थी उत्तर प्रदेश में लाइन ऑर्डर। लाइन ऑर्डर उत्तर प्रदेश का पूरी तरह से ध्वस्त हो चुका था। गुंडे, माफिया, मवाली थानों पर कब्जा करके बैठे थे। समाजवादी पार्टी की सरकार के संरक्षण में लोगों का, आम आदमी का जीवन जीना दूभर हो गया था। इवन देन माताएं बहनें भी शाम को घरों से नहीं निकल पाती थी। व्यवसायी उद्योगपतियों के साथ खुलेआम चौथ वसूली की कार्रवाई होती थी। हमारी सरकार ने पूरी तरह से प्रदेश के माफिया के नेटवर्क को ध्वस्त किया है, तोड़ दिया है। उत्तर प्रदेश में कोई भी अब सक्रिय माफिया गिरोह नहीं है, या तो वो जेल में है या प्रदेश के बाहर है। आपसी वैमनस्यता के कारण जो घटनाएं हो रही हैं, हमारी सरकार ने उसमें भी कड़ी कार्रवाई की है। अब देश के नामी गिरामी उद्योगपतियों ने उत्तर प्रदेश का रुख किया है और सभी लोगों ने माना है कि उत्तर प्रदेश अब उद्योग लगाने लायक है। उत्तर प्रदेश के तरफ इसलिए लोग आकर्षित होते हैं कि सबसे बड़ा मार्केट उत्तर प्रदेश है, यहाँ 25 करोड़ लोग रहते हैं। यदि कोई उत्पाद उत्तर प्रदेश में सफलतापूर्वक बिक्री हेतु उपलब्ध है और लोग खरीद रहे हैं, तो ये माना जाएगा कि देश में सफल हो गया। और कोई भी अगर प्रोडक्ट देश में सफल है, तो पूरी दुनिया में उस उद्योग की चर्चा होती है, उस प्रोडक्ट की चर्चा होती है। इसलिए आप जानते हैं कि दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी फैक्ट्री जो मोबाइल की स्क्रीन बनाती है, सैमसंग, वो चाइना से उठा करके उत्तर प्रदेश राज्य में नोएडा में उन्होंने अपना कारखाना लगाया है। दुनिया में जितने भी मोबाइल की स्क्रीन हैं, वो उत्तर प्रदेश राज्य में ही बनती हैं और देश के और दुनिया के सभी हिस्सों में जाती हैं। अभी हम आप लोगों ने पिछले साल देखा होगा, पिछले जो हमारा कार्यकाल था 2017 से 22 तक का, तो हम लोगों ने इन्वेस्टर सबमिट किया था, फिर ग्राउंड ब्रेकिंग सेरेमनी की थी। दोनों कार्यक्रमों में आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने शिरकत की थी। 4.5 लाख करोड़ से अधिक के पैकेज एमओयू साइन हुए और धरातल पर उतारने का काम हमारी सरकार ने किया। अभी हम लोग दुनिया के सभी उद्योगपतियों को उत्तर प्रदेश की भूमि पर आने के लिए आमंत्रित कर रहे हैं। उनको हम सुदृढ़ कानून व्यवस्था देंगे और सिंगल विंडो के माध्यम से हम सारी नीतियों को उनको एक विंडो पर ला करके उनकी सारे जो लाइसेंस से जारी करेंगे, उनको विद्युत उपलब्ध कराएंगे, उनको जमीन उपलब्ध कराएंगे और ढेर सारे पैकेज हमने तय किए हैं। उत्तर प्रदेश राज्य में यदि कोई उद्योग लगाता है तो ढेर सारी सुविधाएं देने का काम करेंगे। आप देखेंगे जब हमारा ग्लोबल इन्वेस्टर समिट होगा, दुनिया के उद्योगपति आकर के उत्तर प्रदेश में अपना उद्योग लगाएंगे, उनको बेहतर माहौल देने का काम हमारी सरकार कर रही है।
Hello and welcome to the Sustainability 100 Plus platform presented by ABN Bev and Network 18, and I'm your host Ruchira Sharma. There is a broad consensus that India's water sector is facing some critical challenges in almost every theme. The water establishment too accepts this fact broadly, and most reports talk about specific themes and how to deal with them. However, there is a limited body of work about the state of water governance in the country and also the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And in this discussion, that is going to be our focus. Today, we will also look at the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has bagged the Best State Award at the National Water Awards 2022 earlier this year. The theme for this discussion is the private sector's role in building the bridge of economics for a self sustainable, climate friendly agriculture and river rejuvenation model. And for the same, we are joined by an esteemed panel of speakers. So let me begin by introducing our guest today. We have with us Mr. Abhishek Singh, Chairman and MD, Earth Samvarta Foundation. We also have Dr. Vinod Tare, Founding Head, Center for Ganga River Basin Management and Studies, IIT Kanpur. We have with us Ms. Anandi Iyer, Director, Fraunhofer Office, India, and Ms. Naman Gupta, State Program Manager, MP, UNDP. And we also have with us Mr. Ankur Jolly, Legal and Compliance Head, ABN Bev, India. So thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Vinod. Groundwater challenges, large irrigation projects, water pollution, equity and distribution, the challenges that the country faces are way too many. So, in your mind, what are the top three challenges that we are facing currently?
Well, the most important I would say is how to value water. We normally do not value water. I'm not talking about pricing, but valuing water. That's, I think, the first most important challenge. If we learn to value water, I think we will be able to use it appropriately. The second thing that is the most important challenge is managing the distribution of water because we get enough water but is very unevenly distributed. We get probably most of our rains in 30, 40 days, and all that flows and goes into the oceans. If we can make sure that that rapid flow is converted into sluggish flow, we would be able to have enough water. And the third most important thing is if we can make sure that the water loop is closed at a shorter geographical space. So I think these three things would be the most important, in my opinion, if you want to move from where we are to the next level.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Mr. Vinod. And coming to you, Ms. Anandi, are there any specific opportunities associated with these challenges? And according to you, what is the role that the Indian startup ecosystem can play in this?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, see, the most important thing we are, Fraunhofer is working a lot on topics of sustainability, on circular economy in India. In fact, we are participating very heavily with government in Coimbatore, where we have set up a water innovation hub, in Cochin, where we are doing a sustainable neighborhood, where we are looking at energy, food, and management. We are looking at wastewater management, and we are looking at other states where we can implement these pilot projects. We find the major challenge is to get all stakeholders to one table. You talked of startups, but when you're looking at that value chain, starting from government, from citizens, my esteemed panelists talked about value of water. It starts with the citizens, it starts with government. There are corporate citizens involved, there are startups involved, there are research institutions involved. And if you take the example of countries like Germany, what had changed the situation there? Water was also dirty. Rhine River was extremely dirty 30 years back. They put millions of euros, but also a whole lot of energy of the entire ecosystem of stakeholders to bring about a change. And I feel that when you're looking at two aspects, one is at the public sector level, where you talk about citizens being more responsible, governance of the government being more effective and quick. And then you look at sector, the private sector, including startups that pick up technologies that are relevant and push them to market in the shortest period of time. I think it needs a dialogue between these stakeholders so that we're not working in silos and we come together and find first simple solutions that can be pushed out into the market and then quickly scale up so that they have maximum impact.
Definitely. The private sector plays a very critical role. And as you said, we all need to come together going forward. Thank you for sharing your insights there. Mr. Abhishek, I'd like to come to you right now. You do a lot of work in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and that is what we are focusing on today. So, could you take us through some of the primary governance challenges specific to this area?
Thank you for the question. The primary challenge that I see it as our respected gentleman from IIT pointed out, water should have a value, first of all. And it need not be about money or just, but it has to be something, it has to be decided. We have 453 kilometer cube of replenishable winter resources every year, and we have way past short that. So someday it's going to be a very, very major problem, and we are not looking at that. The second thing that I am working in around 30 odd districts here, and the thing that I'm facing the maximum trouble in is development versus sustainability. That is area which needs to be looked into, because development sometimes happens at whims and demands of time frames. You have to achieve this target, you have to meet this road. um, so the damage that development at times does to the ecology cannot
Correct.
be restored by planting a jungle somewhere or restoring a lake somewhere.
Sure.
So airport is made and a lake is dried up so that airport can have a runway. You cannot bring back that lake. You cannot dug a lake somewhere else and claim that we have replaced that lake. So I'm seeing hundreds of such cases, and it is I think a ground level micro, a my view planning has to be done in India, especially in UP, whereby, because I'm very sure that people sitting at the state level or at the national level, they don't know ground level realities of district wise issues. So once a highway is being written, how many trees are being felled? Is it necessary? Is the transport load that efficient? If we are sanctioning industries or creating industrial belts, how much water do they consume? If you are building an airport, uh, is there a need? The question has to be asked. That beautification and development is all fine, it's all great, but we are sitting at a cusp of a very critical time.
Hmm.
As has been repeated over and over again, we might be the last generation that can do anything about climate change. So
Absolutely.
that has to be brought down to the planning level, and I think there is an intent at the top level. When I
Hmm.
speak at the top level, there is an intent, but when the implementation comes down to the ground level, uh, it's not satisfactory. Development is right now, as of today, clashing with sustainability, and that
Hmm.
I'm seeing in every part of the places that I work in.
Sure.
So that's my
So,
objective view. That's the biggest challenge. Yes.
all right. But do you think things have changed in the last decade?
So things have changed. People have become more aware, and we did this thing on Saryu. Our river Saryu, which flows through Ayodhya, has dolphins, gangetic dolphins, has gharials, has crocodiles and stuff. So we used to find shampoo sachets in the river, and they are being stuck in the nose of a tortoise, and it's creating pus and mucus and lots of things. So we created awareness about that. We used to take out public marches and public rallies, and we used to go home to home, and the river is pious and this and that. So you don't need to throw your shampoos. The river is not a bathing place. You want to take a dip, fine. Don't bathe there. Don't use soap and detergent and shampoos there. So the things have changed. That amount of weekly garbage that we collect from the river has changed drastically. uh, the religious content has not gone down much, but then the shampoo and the plastic content, the other things, they have gone down. They have gone down, and the government has become aware. There are STPs, FSTPs which are planned. Storm drains are planned. Some are coming up, some are in planning, but things have changed. But I I have a big fear that the rate of change might not be sufficient enough to save us. That's my biggest fear. That is one thing that I sleep with every night. And I hope I'm wrong.
Definitely, we have miles to go. Uh, Coming to you, Ms. Naman, you work a lot with the state government agencies in MP as a part of your UNDP outreach. And MP and UP have a lot of similarities when it comes to the challenges that they face in terms of natural resources and also opportunities. So, how does UNDP look at states taking more responsibility, specifically pertaining to the water challenges?
Okay, thank you for the question. Basically, as you already mentioned, that UP, MP, and many other maybe landlocked states face similar challenges in terms of natural resource management. And we know that why these changes are. These are because of the developmental pressure, the population pressure, urbanization, etc. Now, the point is that UNDP recognizes all the partners at each level equally important. So we do work with the national government to help them in deriving maybe policies, bringing in international learnings, and then we engage with them at the highest level. But the implementation happens at the state and even at the local level. So if I come to this challenge of related to the water at the state or at the local level, then one of the a very big program, you know about the Mahatma Gandhi this rural employment guarantee scheme, the Manrega. So under that, this is one of the biggest social protection schemes and also one of the biggest natural resource management scheme. So which targets at creating natural resource assets like the water harvesting structures, it promotes the plantation, etc., in the rural areas. Now, what UNDP is doing through one of the programs I'm giving example here is infrastructure for climate resilient growth. This is a program which is funded by the UK government, and UNDP is the implementation partner in 6 states of India.
Right.
Now, what we have been doing, we have been engaging at the state level also, wherein we are sort of helping them in tackling challenges in 3 main areas. We already heard about that there are challenges related to capacity, awareness, knowledge, technical know-how, and also finance. We have the challenges. So how we are going for it is that we are engaging at the grassroots level with the community also, with the help of CSOs, this civil society partners, as well as with the help of the government administration. And in this way, like we are sort of bringing in the element of integration. So when it comes to the integrated resilient planning, we need to have convergence, we need to have partnerships and collaborations by various stakeholders. So for past several years, this program has been supporting villages, the communities in terms of planning the Manrega assets based on the knowledge, based on the IT informed, say, solutions using certain tools like the IT. There is a tool, the GIS we all know about. We know there is another tool that has been developed under this program, which is climate resilient planning tool for the rural these Manrega assets, wherein this micro level identification of climate vulnerability is done, and that is taken into account to plan that which asset of how much dimension, for example, what should be the specification, should be planned where, so that we are using the targeted approach. We are not randomly creating assets of natural resource management anywhere. And this is the approach I think can be scaled up in all the states, because Manrega is being implemented in all the states across the country. And we have collaborations with the Ministry of Rural Development, through which we are sharing these learnings from these 6 states with the national level ministry, and further that is being integrated into entire say other states also. So the Amrit Sarovar, if you are aware, then Amrit Sarovar is the recent this initiative of the government of India, wherein certain ponds, the water bodies have to be developed in the various districts. And this experience of the ICRG program of climate resilient planning of the water harvesting structure is being brought into that scheme also.
We are now joined by Mr. Ankur Jolly, Legal and Compliance Head, ABN Bev, India. So thank you so much for joining in. I'd like to begin by asking you that ABN Bev as an organization has been very vocal about reduce, recycle, and reuse. And you're a water intensive business. So, what does your organization do to replenish the water? And could you also take us through some of your water stewardship initiatives in India?
Thank you. So we are well aware that if there is no water, there will be no beer. So this is the largest and biggest ingredient which we have as a beer.
And as an organization, we need to secure it and secure it in a manner so that it is more sustainable. And we do all the efforts on ourselves, which is as a corporate citizen in our plants, where we are reducing the water wastage, where anything which is going out of our plants or breweries is not or is at zero or something like that. And then if we are discharging anything, it may be reuse, maybe not as an ingredient for the beer, but maybe use as for the steam or maybe washing of the bottles. So we're using all the last droplet of water in our plants, and then we are recharging the whole environment, and this is in collaboration with the individual farmers, communities, and the other organization which is there. In last 10 years for ABI in India, we have done at least 450 of different installations, which is water collection, water storage, usage in a water treatment, which is all across our 7 plants in different 5 states, that we are increase our production or reuse by 20%, 25% by last year. And if you ask me what is the total X which we are recapping, it is around 1.5x. And in 2025, we are taking a very high number, which is doubling ourselves, which is 2x of recapping it. So that is what we are doing for last 10 years. And our future plan is for reducing, recycling, and reusing the water for us.
All right. Thank you for sharing all those learnings. Very interesting insights there. Coming to Miss Anandi, when we talk about India's challenges, that India faces in terms of water management, do you think that there are any examples that we can learn from, when it comes to across the globe challenges, and also what are the lessons that we can draw and learn from them?
See, I'm always very hesitant about trying to say that there are examples outside which we should try and fit in India, because the dynamics are entirely different. The conditionalities and the context in which we work are very, very different. There's probably India in many ways is extremely unique. But having said that, one of the fundamental learnings that comes from such public property like water, energy, is that there has to be a very clear understanding of the value proposition of these. That they are a commodity that is not there forever, and an awareness that we all have a responsibility towards it is paramount. The second thing that has worked for many countries which have worked around the food, water, energy, they have, like I said before, brought the entire stakeholders together and
Mhm.
tried to create a dialogue, where everybody takes on responsibilities and there is a shared vision and there is a planning in place. I mean, we do know that in India, sometimes we tend to overplan and under implement. But I
Yes.
think lack of a good planning can also cause a lot of problems. So there needs to be a strategy. And let us pick up very decentralized approach is what I would suggest from based on our implementation, which we have done with India. For example, the Sustainable Neighborhood Project in Kerala, which we are doing, is just about 600 houses where we are looking at how can you use solar rooftops, how can you use wastewater management, how can you look at other commonalities that come together in order to create a completely sustainable environment. And once that works, and you have a proof of concept, then you
Mhm.
can look at other areas, other geographies within India, and see what is the little bit of tinkering that you need to do, but what are the core learnings that you can pick up and take it on. Because in India, at the end of the day, scale is of extreme importance. If you look at a country like Germany and you look at a town, you may look at 2 million people, and a similar geography in India would have 8 to 10 million people. So,
Yeah.
uh, there are differences which you have to factor in. And one last point on this is that I think we need to have a network of similar countries, similar problems which are being shared, and have a
Mhm.
learn and share and kind of a network where we can collaborate. For example, we have set up a water center of excellence in South Africa. We are
All right.
working a lot in Indonesia. So these are countries which can be a little similar to India, and we can share our expertise and experiences and learn from each other.
Great. Definitely, collaboration is the way forward, and that's the only way for us to go. But I'd like to bring in Dr. Vinod at this point. reduce, recycle, reuse. That is the mantra for rejuvenating water resources. But she just spoke about, the private sector's role, startup ecosystem. So how do you think corporates can walk the tightrope, and what are the kind of balances and checks that are required to do more in this space?
Well, I think the corporates and the private sector obviously does most of the things. It's a different thing that the governance and regulation is in the government, but if you really look at on the ground, who implements it is actually the private sector. The important thing is to bring in kind of convergence amongst what I generally call it as 5 P's. P is the people, the next P is the policy, the third P is the plan, fourth P is the program, and the last P, which is actually executed on the ground, is the projects. Now, what happens is at the top level, there is a general vision and understanding that yes, we have to do river centric development, but then this is implemented through sectoral ministries, agriculture, and as we go down, there is more and more divergence that happens. So I think our one of the most important challenges that how do we bring convergence, and there is lot to learn from ourselves, our mistakes only in the past. Yes, what we normally do is for the industries, when we impose our corporate sector impose reuse recycle, we expect that they will produce water which is of domestic water quality or whatever. I think what we
Correct.
need to do is to regenerate our water bodies is also one of the major uses. Okay, and that is where we need to talk about, and in that process we also utilize the nature's ability. So we have two extremes. Either we leave it to the, we force the corporate to do everything, or we believe that the nature will take care of everything. I think what is important, if you really want to achieve, talk from the sustainability point of view, and talk about equity and sharing the responsibilities, it is
Mhm.
basically we have to make sure that we utilize the artificial, or what we call it as electromechanical ways, and the nature's capability in a balanced way, and not take any of the two extreme views. And if you do that, then I think obviously what you're saying is the corporates are walking on a tightrope, their business margins are very low. That
Mhm.
can be to some extent taken care of when we talk about reuse recycle. So reuse recycle has to be
Mhm.
taken in a little larger perspective, and not say that my sewage I will use it in my house only. Okay, so if you talk about little larger cycle, let's say at the village level or at the town level, I think we will be able to manage it much better.
Definitely. Thank you for taking us through that roadmap over there. But I'd like to bring you in, Ms. Naman. If you could take us through UNDP strategy and how is it engaging with the private sector to achieve the SDG targets?
Okay. UNDP, as I was mentioning, the convergence is one way wherein we are bringing in various partners, including the private sector partners, to play the role. Apart from that, now one like in each of the UNDP as an organization, we have the private sector engagement strategy, wherein we do invite partner private sector organizations from not just the big ones, but small
Mhm.
and medium ones also to participate on the sustainability agenda. So if you look at we have a strategy of 2018 to 2022, we have the partnership strategy at the UNDP, which aims to assist various countries to align private sector activities and investments with the 2030 agenda of sustainability. So
All
herein what we do is really we engage with investors also, we engage with the other corporates, other businesses also of all sizes, as I mentioned, and try to sort of embed SDGs into their decision making process. So this is at the high level that we engage with them. And for that, we need to, when we're talking about really engaging the private sectors, we need to have conducive policy environment and ecosystem in place. And to do that, we are engaging with the government organizations, government stakeholders to sort of create the systems wherein it can be made more conducive for private sector to jump in. Now, one example that I would like to give you is one of the initiatives by 5 UN agencies that's called as Partnership for Action on Green Economy, the PAGE. And this India has now joined the PAGE in 2018, and since then the actions are happening at the national level as well as at the state level on two key aspects. One is on the policy and the kind of a technical support to bring in the expertise to help the government in devising the policy, in integrating these green economy concepts into the programs and policies. And the second is the action on ground, which has the component of capacity building and the demonstration of pilot projects. So in MP and Uttarakhand, for example, we recently concluded a green economy learning assessment, particularly in urban sector. Now, what it came out to us is that first step that we need to really have in place is to have enough capacity and awareness with the government stakeholders so that they know that where at which places there is an entry point to incorporate green elements, whether it's agriculture, whether it's water, whether it's building or energy sectors. And once they understand, then the governments at state level, at the national level, or can devise the instruments which make the conducive environment for private sector to get and partner with on the implementation side. So this is how at various levels we have been engaging, and not only just by really partnering directly with the private sector, but also with the larger, the government, because government can drive all the policy and related, say, opportunities they can provide to the private sector. And this is how we are engaging with them.
All right. Great. Moving on to the next question, Dr. Vinod, could you, for the benefit of our audience, explain what exactly is zero budget farming?
Well, I think this zero budget farming, in my opinion, there is a slight misnomer in the sense that when you say budget, it appears that one doesn't require any investment into that. But what actually zero budget farming means, that there is no input of artificially produced chemicals like fertilizers, insecticides, and then by changing the farming practice, wherein we have multi crops. Also, some which have a short cropping cycle, some which have a relatively long cropping cycle, and the crops with short cropping cycle support the efforts that are required for long cropping cycle. So basically, it is all natural ways of doing things, and making sure that no fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides are used, and the soil's fertility is maintained by in a way recycling products which are produced from nature. Like for example, extensively cow dung is used, cow urine is used, and some naturally available products are used. So that is what is the natural zero budget. But it doesn't mean that the farmer doesn't have to spend anything. He has to spend either in form of labor or something. And the main issue that comes in why it is not getting implemented in a large scale, one of the thing is, of course, the government spending is not what they say is as much as it should be. And the second thing is slowly and slowly the awareness and large scale application has to come. And in some places it has been found that the productivity goes down after a couple of years. So those are the concerns. So some more scientific understanding of the thing has to come in this, so that it becomes more sustainable. But the concept wise, yes, it is good. We need to do much more than what we actually are doing in the zero budget farming.
So, how smart are your agricultural practices? Do you see agri based businesses moving towards zero budget natural farming in the near future?
I think we are really using the technology for educating and smart farming, which we can bring in. Right now, we are covering around 2,500 farmers, and this is Haryana and Rajasthan specifically, more than 400 villages. And this is mainly limitation to barley, because that is the main ingredients for malt production of our barley and for the beer. And these initiatives are mainly very smart. One, we are using a R&D in terms of our technology base, where we can talk about the seeds, what kind of seeds which can be best, what kind of yield which is coming up, the quality of product which is coming up, and the grains which is coming out. That is one part. The other part is, how do I support my farmer where the crop is being sown till the harvest has happened? Are the crops growing in a particular manner which they should be particular manner used to be do, or there is something which is required? Maybe some disease are there, some fertilizers are required, some insecticides are required. All those technologies are used, and how can the farmer sell it in a more profitable manner, more in a manner which is not harming the sociology in terms of where he's selling it, more soil friendly and more resource efficient in terms of whatever he's using in terms of that. We have covered up with the technology. If you ask me how we are doing it in the smartly, we have these videos which is coming on YouTube. Anybody can see it. We have these apps which is Kisan Hubs, where all this process which I'm talking about is there. They don't need to talk to anybody, they just need to open. The digitization can be there and they can use it. And if you require some help, we have feet on grounds. We require our teams to go and help the farmers, support them, answer them in all the three respect, which is seed, the growth, and where and how they should be selling it. And this is the whole process which we have done it on the technology and using this Kisan Hub. The other piece is zero budgeting, which you talk about the UP government has taken on. This is a fantastic way of coming from a so-called modern ways of farming to a natural ways of farming. I think one hurdle or one resources which we require is it takes around 2 to 3 years of coming from from a modern ways of farming to a natural ways of farming. So how do we support the farmers during the this period of 3 years where their changeover is happening? But this changeover per se is not it is given by a farmer itself and the community. So we support it in terms of the advisory, that how they can do it. Then we support them in the soil information, that how the soil, what kind of fertilizer which is there. But that is a resource constrained environment. I will say that we are grateful that UP is doing that. I think many more government has to do that, community has to take on, and individual mindset. In fact, I personally I feel this is a lifestyle change. So how does a farmer which is looking at the other farmer which is a neighbor farmer and looking at the yield and having a less yield because of initially 1 or 2 years, how does this particular farmer cope with that? That is a mental change which we require, and support like UP government is giving. How can we support when there is yes yield and there is less profitability, and where we come in terms of supporting the technology and how they can take it forward, and then we can have a, after they have shipped over, we can have these produced directly buying from them, so we can come in that. So there are many things which we are doing in this particular field, but this is not an individual ABI, but this is one personally a farmer has to take on. The other piece is community and government supporting it. So that is what we are doing in the zero budgeted natural farming.
I'd like to come to you, Mr. Abhishek, but just before that, Ms. Anandi, do we have sufficient evidence around the effectiveness of zero budget natural farming?
No, not to my mind. I mean, we have been following this quite a bit because from Fraunhofer, we do several other activities around the farm, which adds to productivity, uses natural resources, such as the photovoltaic, agriculture, where we use panels, solar panels above the farm produce, so that you use energy to a also allow plants to get that much sunlight as they need. So it's not just about fertilizers and inputs, but it's also about utilizing natural resources in a very, very comprehensive and a closed circuit way.
Right.
Sometimes we also look at hydropower. We look at what are the resources available for that
Mhm.
tract of land, which can be utilized in a bouquet, right? So we
True.
see it slightly in a slightly different perspective, but the fact remains that even whether it's photovoltaic agriculture or whether it is zero budget farming, the
Mhm.
empirical data is still not completely there because it's a developing kind of
Space.
technology or an application. But having said that, I think these are all extremely valuable inputs that go into the agricultural sector. In many cases, the question remains, can we reach the scale that we need for productivity to go up? So they remain at the moment in time proof of concept or at small scale experimentation, which as a concept it is very, very valuable. But in
Mhm.
terms of productivity, scale, and efficacy, it still
Mhm.
needs to stand the test of time.
All right. Great. Mr. Abhishek, do you think UP is ready for this change? And if you could take us through some of the behavioral aspects that need to be looked into to bring about these rather ambitious changes.
First of all, I will like to say Anandi ma'am's last statement uh, before this one was bang on target. UP and for that matter, India cannot be modeled on any other country. And UP of all, even within India, UP
Mm,
cannot be judged. So I have worked in Maharashtra, I have worked in Haryana, but UP is different. When you talk about 22 crore people, almost, uh, it's different. So, is UP ready to move? Yes, we have a youthful population. We have a young chief minister who is determined to do something. We have the momentum. Yes. Um,
mhm,
Ground challenges exist, which is it's very hard to explain till you work on the ground. It's very hard to explain that what inertia exists in the ground,
all
and
right.
that inertia takes lot of moment to move. So at this point of time, I really believe that हमारे यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री जी Mr. Narendra Modi, he launched a capacity building commission. He
Mhm,
envisioned capacity building commission as something that will re-educate and retrain the bureaucrats. I think
sure.
we need that at a very expedited scale. The ground level bureaucracy has to be in sync with what the current demands are, what the current thing is. See, the thing is, a chief minister or a prime minister can announce a scheme on the stage anywhere, anytime. Implementation has to be done by the guys who have been in the service of 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. They have a
Yes.
way of working, they have a way of doing things, and they're not wrong. And I'm not saying
Mhm.
they're corrupt or they're wrong. The thing is,
It is.
they don't know,
Mhm,
what to do. They don't understand climate change, they don't understand water depletion. नहर को काट आप if you are a if you live in UP, तो बिजली you take a कटिया connection from a pole for बिजली, you cut a नहर का ये side canal की अपने खेत को irrigate कर लिया. So
mm,
paddy culture, जो the current paddy culture it is currently there in UP, we are trying to team up with farmers and teach them ki the puddling culture is
yes.
going to kill your production over time because water is not there. We don't have enough water for puddling culture. You have to go to seedling culture.
Mhm,
So there has to be a shift, but that shift has to come from society. The shift has to come from India. The shift has to come from the government. And I believe UP is ready to move.
all
I
right.
believe that there is intent in the government, there's intent in policymakers, but I think that intent needs to be known. जैसे नमन मैम ने कहा
Mhm,
कि something about Amrit Sarovar and Amrit Mahotsav, this thing. Amrit Sarovar scheme is a very, very, very good scheme. I am all praised in the scheme. But then if you see with Manrega, lots of Gram Pradhans did digging of village ponds, right? What happened was even the ponds that used to never dry up even in the driest seasons are drying up. When you talk about UP, you talk about alluvial soil. It's like a
yes.
sponge. Once you remove the calcite soil that is containing the water, once you remove and you dig into that, you
Mhm,
actually make the pond a 3 month, 4 month spectacle. 8 महीने there is going to be no water in that pond, and this is a wide scale problem. People launch good schemes. This is Amrit Sarovar is a beautiful scheme, beautiful scheme. but it has to be implemented in a scientific way. People have to understand that alluvial soil is there and it is going to absorb water like a sponge. You have to make barriers for that. You have to plant trees accordingly. It's not happening. The intent is all there, the willingness is there. People are tired. People this year, especially this year, I have had a delegation of more than 1,600 farmers just last week. um, they they don't have anything to eat. Their paddy fields have dried up, and once they plant the fields got dried up, they had pulses in their field, and pulses got drowned in the deluge that happened in the late September. So they don't have anything to eat this season. Now the point is, they want a change. They don't know. They don't know what the change is. They are not. They are the people who are concerned about putting food on the table on day-to-day basis. They are not going to be involved in the policy making procedure. So we, as concerned citizens, have to come together. The government has to come together, and the bureaucracy has to retrain. It has to re-evolve.
Mhm.
As Ahir ma'am said, I'm all for it. India is a very different problem. The problem is not about intent. The problem is not about the youthful population. The problem is not about momentum. The problem is the implementation phase. The middle phase is where everything gets to hell. So that is my experience. Um, I think I have taken too much time, but fine.
No, that's fine. Very important points there. And as you said, we do have some great initiatives. We do have some very pertinent policies, but what needs to be done is on the implementation side. And as all of you pointed out, India is a unique country. It has its own unique challenges, but it is also the land of opportunities. So thank you all for sharing your valuable insights and learnings with us. And thank you all for joining us.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 100 Plus Sustainability Masterclass. We're back today to talk about and listen to a very pertinent topic. Today's topic is how are effective water intervention strategies developed? Before we dive in, a little bit about our speaker today. Vikas Kataria. He is the Director, Resource Mobilization and Communications at WaterAid India. Vikas is a seasoned professional with over 2 decades of experience in global banking and not-for-profit sector. He has been associated with WaterAid India as a part of the senior management for about 6 years and is responsible for financial resources for the organization. He has a double master's in management with business economics and psychology. He's also a certified CSR professional from IICA and a trained social broker. He is a member of the Institute of Directors of India and advises various organizations in the sector about the sustainability aspects in India as well as global. He was previously associated with Care India, HelpAge India, Citibank, and General Motors in various roles ranging from executive director to vice president. Welcome. Before we start our first question, I just had I'm a little curious about the social broker. Could you explain what that entails?
Well, first of all, thanks for an elaborate introduction, Ameya. I don't think I'm worth it, but thank you anyways for that. To your question on social broker, I think it's a very interesting one. So what a social broker is basically who could deal with multi-stakeholders in order to bring a common objective while maintaining a balance of their individual objectives in that. So that's what a social broker is all about. It's a term basically which is coined in the development sector and which means that bringing together stakeholders to ensure a deep-rooted impact. So I hope this helps you understand what it means.
Definitely. Thank you for answering that. I guess without much further ado, we can start off with our first question. Why is there a need for water interventions?
So, I mean, it's a very interesting question. And I want to kind of step back a bit before we could respond to this. And I just also want to acknowledge the fact that I work with an organization which represents water particularly, and by its name, it's called as WaterAid. And why this is coined, that it was found that drinking water is not normal to the whole of the world as such, barring only a few privileged ones. And hence, that's what we stand for. So obviously your question is in the same line, why water interventions are needed. And basically, to summarize, and I'll keep it particularly to India so that we could put the contextual part of it. But anyway, just summarizing the points that, if we were to look globally, it's said that the earth is constituted by about 70% as water. And yet we are talking about why water is important and why water should be aided to people. The fact is that only about 1.5% of global water is available to human use. It's potable water. Rest of it is not fit for drinking purposes. And within that 1.5%, entirely it is not available again to humankind. So whatever we get, we see it's less than 1% which is available to us. Rest is in the form of glaciers, in the form of reservoirs or lakes which are beyond human imagination on that. Nonetheless, if we just put this 1.5% as 100%, then it, and we assume that this 100% is what goes to the whole of the world. India gets about 4% of that 100% as fresh water resources, wherein we have about 17% of global population, which is sitting in India. So imagine the kind of paradox we have, which is, itself is a 4 times gap. Hence, there is a huge dependence on groundwater, which means that, we continue to rely for about 80% of our water needs on the groundwater alone, which means again that, that per capita water availability is diminishing extensively. Sources suggest that, or basically the data points which even government floats suggest that about 40% of the population in India will not have access to drinking water by 2030, which is hardly 8 years away. So that's the extent of problem which we face at this stage. If we simply talk about, crisis of this water, which is the driver for not only the survival for humankind, but it's also an important driver for economics, not only in India, but world over as well. So if we look at the availability of water, whatever is available to the people, there is a huge crisis on water quality as well, which is emerging in the form of fluoride, arsenic, iron content, and even, nitrates and salinity within this context itself. You add further to this, there would be a problem of bacterial contamination or other microbial infections on that as well. So much so that India stands on 120th pedestal out of 122 countries on Global Water Quality Index. So that's the situation if we were to talk about this. Similarly, water quality is one part. There's another hand, we have issues of wastewater recycling. We are consuming a lot of water, but wasting it and not bringing that back into the system, which also, if unaddressed, creates a havoc and adds to the burden of available water for that matter. Now, if we just look at these contexts, water is not as simple as it looks like. It's a driver of drudgery for many of the people around the country and around the world. If unaddressed, this would further compound the problem, because if we just see in the form of this impacts communities adversely in terms of their health, especially the children. I'll just give you a statistic that about 154 children die in India alone who are under age of 5. And this is due to the preventable diarrhea, which is caused because of poor water quality or in terms of poor sanitation. So this is one side of it. On the other side, it impacts women the most disproportionately. You would never see a man carrying, water pitchers on their head, or mostly, you would see only women or girls carrying all of this burden. So instead of doing something productive, which could bring their dignity level up, they are put into use like this to fetch water from miles on daily basis. So much so that girls are taken out of schools and they are put into the use where they could go and fetch water. So which means that education is impacted for girls adversely. It also means that the equity is also disturbed for that matter for gender particularly. And if we also look at, this also impacts the health, which means that people who are going to be in daily wages jobs or who are going to be in productive work, they are kind of down with their downtime due to health, which also means that, it would adversely impact their income or livelihoods. Lastly, climate change. There is a massive issue in terms of increasing trends, which suggest that events of flood or events of droughts are happening at a very frequent pace. And these are all again related with water per se. So we are up against a very big challenge, and that's why water interventions are needed.
Thank you for answering that. And I'm very glad to notice that you did bring in the concept of gender into this as well. It's very pertinent, and I'm glad you addressed that. We'll move on to the second question. What, in your opinion, do you think is an effective strategy to plan for water interventions?
Well, I think, water strategies are multi-pronged. Actually, to start with, we should look at the scientific baseline studies or need assessments before planning any water intervention per se. The studies can include hydrogeological aspects. It could include socioeconomic aspects that may have direct relationship with either sanitation or hygiene, which are the key components to the safe water access. Looking at hardware elements focused on infrastructure, water source sustainability, and water distribution per se. It could also look at software elements, which focuses on behavioral change, equity, ownership, gender aspects, and basically, how do we really bring harmony within the community when they distribute water. Then looking at key components of community and governments as the key stakeholders, basically to scale up whatever has been already done in that case. You asked about social brokers, so that's exactly an example of being social brokership, that how do we really bring these stakeholders together, including children as catalyst of change, because children are the big carriers of behavioral change. And that's how we need to include them either in the school levels or basically within the community context as well. Then defining measurable outputs. When we define different activities, usually we fall prey to the fact that we don't put those quantified measures within that. So basically we need to ensure that whether these are outputs or even outcomes need to be very much quantified in that sense, which could be measured actually. Sustainability angle also needs to be put into the perspective with community-based ownership in that context to basically ensure that when we have a withdrawal strategy, the communities should be able to take it up to a level that they continue to own it up and flesh it out further. So that's what I think would summarize how interventions should be structured around water in that case.
Thank you for sharing that as well, because essentially no one talks about how important the community is. And that kind of leads me to the next question about how important is community support for successful interventions?
Well, I think community support has always been, I think, this is most of the times underplayed, and I feel very strongly that the community support for long-term sustainability, the cooperation, ownership, and consensus building are the prerequisites for any intervention. Before we take it up, these are not the solutions we force upon communities, but rather take them into consultation when we define these aspects. So some of these elements could be actual situation analysis, looking at the need assessment part of the communities, that what they need, how they visualize these things as part of the solution, what kind of water availability is there, how do they ration it, what are the uses of the water they are putting up in the practice, and what are the practices which are prevalent there in the communities. What kind of water budgeting and rationing these communities are doing within themselves. Sometimes the upper caste communities, they have larger access on the water vis-a-vis to the community members which are from the lower caste. So how does this power dynamics play within the community in terms of budgeting and rationing? um, how do how do we mobilize these communities for effective behavior change, because they're the agents who are going to really change. They're the ones who are going to own it up. We are just going to be assisting them in that process. And then lastly, how do we ensure that equitable distribution, whether it is in terms of pipe water supply, infrastructure creation when it is coming to the water conservation, and how do we really ensure that these structures are kept with community stakeholding when they operate and maintain these.
Great. Thank you for answering that, because that's essentially what we're looking for. We would want the community to be completely involved and take it up instead of having a external maintenance system in place. We would like for them to take ownership for it. I completely agree with your thought. Moving on to the next question. What are the gaps and best practices in the models being implemented by corporates to tackle water issues?
So again, very interesting question, Ameya. It's like weighing out pros and cons of different aspects. Particularly when corporates start to take up these aspects. I'll talk about gaps first. Most of the times, these interventions are infra-driven. Most of the corporates, they relate with tangible infrastructure driven aspects, and there is less focus on software elements which relate with behavioral change, the usage, the need assessment part of the communities, and community ownership. So those usually get missed out. There's another part which is very striking, which we call as backyard syndrome, that most of the corporates want to operate in their backyard wherever they have their offices, factories, plants, and there is a very specific trend where they fall prey to the fact that as if the need exists only in their backyards. So basically there is always a paradoxical gap between what's available and where the need is. So I think that's a very big issue in that aspect. Looking at there's another aspect which basically looks like that the corporates fall prey to psychology where they feel that what they know is the best, and they disregard the delivery partners or the NGOs who are partnering with them. Instead, they should treat those NGOs or delivery partners at ground with respect to their expertise, what they bring onto the table, instead of treating them as purely service delivery of what they thought about. So I think that will set the tone very well. In terms of looking at last mile, again, there is a simple tendency of getting carried away with the fact that whatever is easily available should be accessed, and last mile usually get missed out in this process. When they look at water interventions, again, there is a pure play, I would say, the fogginess around, linking or not linking the other aspects beyond water alone. For example, if they look at gender, the health gets missed out in this. The income generation part of communities gets missed out in this, equity gets missed out, and so is disability or other such softer elements. So, which is what means that, water is very much overarching, and these gaps should be covered in terms of that. Lastly, there is again a fallacy or a myth that whatever is sent on ground, for example, 100 rupee are sent on the ground, 100 rupee will reach out, or at least 95 rupee will reach out only to program, and there are no other administrative or operational overheads, that gets missed out in their psychology, because they feel that if there is money spent on the capacity, the operational overheads, and other administrative part, that is not part of the program delivery, which is again a myth, and I want to break it. This is very much a part of quality delivery on the ground, because otherwise what will happen that you might deploy that 100 rupee, but you will not get the economy of scales on that front. And expertise suggests that, as long as there are enough focus on complementarity and expertise of the NGOs which are operating in this space, the results and outcomes are far more greater in that case. So I'll basically stop here in terms of gaps, but let me also talk about some good quality best practices which I have encountered, particularly in my experience on water interventions. There are a lot of good shining examples also which corporates have picked up, where they've shown maturity and also understanding of different aspects which we just enumerated earlier in that and some of these projects are focused on water replenishment and water sustainability part. We have examples where we could see that how the water or source sustainability is kept in mind when water access and distribution is done. So there is a precursor to when the water access is provided, where water replenishment is kept in mind. So it is something like a bank balance or a bank account where there is adequate deposits which are made before withdrawals are done, so as to maintain a balance of it. So we have examples, which we have seen in our experience. PepsiCo projects are very much focused on water sustainability. ABN Bev, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Services. There are also adequate examples where we have seen that there are focus areas where we have been able to build equity as well as water sustainability from water replenishment perspectives. For example, Amazon Web Services, we are working in a river basin where we are ensuring that there is adequate recharge done. Similarly, with Microsoft, we are also working in a urban area where recharge is done before we could really ensure that water access is provided. And in the same way, when we're working with ABN Bev, we are also looking at how adequate recharge is done in order to ensure that different water bodies are playing a role to provide water access in that case. Similarly, we have seen examples of rainwater harvesting, how communities are mobilized, their softer elements are captured, and when they are driven with a campaign base, they really go back to ensure that they are using this infrastructure and making the most of it. And they are including different stakeholders like government, they are including stakeholders like private sector, they are including stakeholders like media in order to drive very large outcomes. We saw such an example in the form of a campaign called WALC, WALC, which is Water Leadership and Conservation in Hyderabad. So in one of our intervention areas where WaterAid basically led communities to define what they want and what are their needs and how they can link up with government and other stakeholders, there was a massive campaign which was undertaken by Hyderabad government itself, where Hyderabad Water Sanitation and Sewerage Board was led by their chief executive, and it helped us define a very big campaign for a major part of Hyderabad. So this is how different aspects can play a role. Lastly, I will talk about a consortium which is very differently managed, and WaterAid and ABN Bev, they're participating on that and co-leading this consortium, where many of the stakeholders from government, academia, industries, private sector, as well as media and civil society, they've all come together to basically redefine how groundwater recharge and water distribution can be done from household to household level in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So I think this is a very big step on that, and a very different type of a campaign. And one more, I think I just remembered one more, led by Standard Chartered Bank in partnership with WaterAid to look at wastewater recycling and which are the different innovative models which can be invented and then scaled up with the help of government. And this is what essentially WaterAid has been trying on that front. So these are some shining examples of best practices which are undertaken recently. And I'll stop here.
Thank you for sharing the myth as well as some of the best practices, because it was good to understand that eventually corporates or any other organization working on the ground is on the same side. So you are working together for a common goal, and that's something people tend to forget when they're looking at collaborating with not-for-profits when they're doing some work. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on to our last question. What would be your advice for someone who is new in the space and wants to start planning water interventions?
Well, I think first of all, they need to find a credible partner who could assist them, in basically identifying the need areas or the need assessment on the ground and conduct a study which basically could provide them with insights that what the communities actually need, what is the problem they are against, and how this can be solved. And when we look at solve, we provide community-led planning, sensitization, capacity building, and management is which is what is required in the overall context of these things. There is also a need to be mindful of what community, how much of the resources community is holding and what is the gap. So that gap analysis basically also defines that how much of funding is needed in that context and what could be done about that. So in all, I think when we look at, ensuring we're looking at water, it should not be purely on water alone. We should look at sanitation and hygiene as a clubbed part of it, as an umbrella under the umbrella of water per se. Similarly, if we look at, the benefits beyond water or sanitation or hygiene, as I already mentioned, that we need to also look at underlying factors which we are solving for when we are investing on water, which could be on health, dignity, equity, women leadership, and even providing for their income generating activities, or in terms of how this could lead to a larger sustainable and good quality of life for them. So these are some of the aspects which are needed, which needs to be looked with a flexible mindset rather than a fixed one, that we know the solution and this is what we're going to produce for community. So it shouldn't be force fit, but it should be in the form of what could be done collectively in that aspect. And lastly, we need to see NGOs as complementing experts rather than a service provider for that matter, because that's how the equitable planning and equitable respect will come for what could lead to a much larger outcome in this regard.
Thank you for sharing that. So this concludes our last question. Thank you so much, Vikas, for your candor and your knowledgeable insights on water interventions, your time, as well as giving us the opportunity to learn from you. I'm sure everyone listening in would have been benefited from that. So on this note, we'll be ending today's masterclass. That's all from us.
Thank you, Maya. I think it's such a pleasure, and I really compliment AB and Bev for running such a kind of an opportunity and a platform which basically not only captures information and it disseminates it as well. So thank you to you and AB and Bev team. Have a good time.